welcome to Julia and Lucy's Quiet Leadership Revolution, the podcast for senior and aspiring leaders who want to make their voice heard and their impact felt through thoughtful, reflective, confident leadership. I'm Lucy Gower. I'm a facilitator, trainer and coach, and I empower leaders to build their happy, confident and high-performing teams. And today we have a change of format for this podcast because I'm really excited that today I have Anj Cairns, who's an ADHD coach and trainer, coming to talk to us about leading with ADHD and how you support your team. And I'm especially excited because this is a request that we've had from you, one of our listeners. So Anj, welcome. So lovely to have you here.
Hello, Lucy. Yeah, it's lovely to be here as well.
So tell me a little bit about you and your background. What brought you to be an ADHD coach and trainer?
Well, as often is the case, it was a bit of a wiggly, squiggly journey from starting off in education as a primary teacher in that last century through to many years spent as a leader in charities, leading small national charities largely, having a great time, but moving from job to job and experiencing periods and cycles almost of burnout. And then we fast forward through to sort of the pandemic, and I am reaching the point where perimenopause is kicking in. So my hormones are all over the place. I have historically sort of been medicated for depression, and suddenly not being able to work out, get any of it under control, and trying different antidepressants and HRT, which helped with some things, but then really not kind of understanding what was going on, because I was experiencing like very explosive rage and an inability to do the things I'd been able to do for most of my life. And a GP, a locum, said to me on the phone while we were doing all those phone appointments, well, you know, I will up your HRT, but given that you've got a history of depression, maybe go away and think about why you're experiencing this rage. And at that point, obviously, there was quite a bit of rage in my thing going on.
How dare you suggest that?
You're the medical professional. I did go away and do a deep dive. And that led me into the space where I was like, oh, ADHD, surely not. I can't have ADHD. I don't fit any of those things. And having been a primary teacher in the 90s, taught those like stereotypical small boys who are running around, creating kind of a bit of chaos in the classroom. I'm just like, that's nothing. I'm nothing like that. But the more I learned about it, I went kind of down this spiral. At the same time, I think probably acknowledging that after many years in that charity leadership space, that I was ready for something different, and looking at what that could be and deciding to take a shift really and explore coaching. So, and ADHD coaching is a much needed thing at the moment because we have many, many people being diagnosed later in life and having to cope with that transition, both personally and in a workspace.
So you went through a big chunk of your career not considering that you may have any sort of ADHD, and then fairly recently, like in the last 5 years, a GP has picked up that there might be something else here that could help you. And when did you get your diagnosis? Is that the right words to use as well?
Yes. Yeah, no, that's the right one. Thank you for checking in, because the language around this is also quite complicated.
Absolutely.
So this all happened towards the end of 2022. I got my diagnosis in the January of 2023. I went private because I couldn't wait. And I'd heard all kinds of stories about the NHS waiting list, which turned out to be true. And I was luckily in a position to be able to go private. So it was quite sort of a quick process for me, and answering lots of questions. And I wanted to know, I was kind of desperate to know, is this what it is? Is this through my whole life what's been affecting me? And I was off work with burnout at the time.
Right.
So it fitted sort of well into the exploratory stuff that might help give me those answers. The diagnosis itself is sort of a moment in time. It doesn't give you all the answers, it gives you some of them, but then it takes a while to process. And thinking about sort of people in those leadership roles, having that like suddenly come upon you throws out what you're doing, because you are having to unpick everything that you've understood about yourself, how you fit into the world's expectations as you see them, and what you need for yourself now. And unfortunately, there's no magic pill for that. So you don't wake up the next day and go, oh, I've got ADHD. Now I know all the things that are going to help.
Yeah. And I guess there's something around like the lens through which you see yourself in the world. Well, you tell me, did it suddenly kind of make sense, or were you like, no, like, tell me how you felt about kind of having that? I suppose it's a label, isn't it?
It is a label. Yeah. Yeah. People say, oh, I've had people say to me, why do you need a label? And I said, because that label for me is the thing that's helping me to identify how my brain works and what I need in my life and what I need to change to be able to live a productive, thriving, happy life. And so there was some relief.
Yes.
There was a lot of disbelief, like maybe they've got it wrong. Maybe this isn't the case. Maybe I'm making this up because I read lots of stuff online. So I'm making this up. And this is quite common. And I think it's part of that processing. And then things kind of begin to unfold and you start to reflect on your life. And a lot of people experience kind of a grief process of like, what could have been if I had had this support earlier, if I'd had medication earlier, if I'd understood earlier. I didn't have that so much in a direct way, but there was definitely an unpicking of my life. And even now I'm like, oh, that thing happened. And so how does that relate? How does that fit in? Because ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition, which means that you have it from birth. And it doesn't always directly show up because they didn't think that women and girls had ADHD. And then there was the thinking that the boys grew out of it when they got to a certain age. And that's, as often happens with science and learning, that's changed. Our understanding of what it is has changed now. So yeah, a lot of reflection, a lot of, I'm not broken though. Like that, there's a point when I coach people and a lot of people are, I know it is now, but like I've taken this medication, I'm not fixed. And almost that they expect that they will be fixed, but it's more about going about that learning what your strengths are, what are challenges, what kind of support do you need in this situation, and definitely a lot around unpicking those beliefs that you may have built up, those limiting beliefs that you built up over the years.
And so help me understand a little bit more. If you are listening and you thinking, oh, perhaps I have ADHD, or if you are you have your diagnosis, or maybe you've got people in your team, and help me understand what is it? You've talked about it being a neurological condition. What does that mean? How might that show up? How might I know?
Okay, so this is the bit where it often gets a bit complicated. It's not simple, but I'm just kind of give you the overview. So in terms of diagnostic clinical terms, there are 3 types. So there is the one that you might have that stereotypical image of, the small boy bouncing around, which fits into the hyperactive impulsive type. So over talking, not being able to wait your turn, not being able to stand still, fidgeting, making impulsive decisions, which show up in people's life in lots of different ways. It could be, it's that, yes, that sounds great, let's do it. They're saying yes quickly to things without doing that. But also there's a more serious end to that, because there's a sort of a more higher likelihood of addiction, or problem drinking is probably not the right phrase, gambling, etc. Those kind of unhelpful coping mechanisms that people use to almost to self-medicate. So there's that side, and then there's the inattentive presentation, which is often talked about more about the kind of the daydreamy girl in the classroom. But again, that's just a stereotype of what that is. It's the, actually your mind is drifting off, you're thinking about 10,000 things at the same time. It's not necessarily externally shown. So it could be that, you've just been really quiet, but all this stuff is going on in your head. And then we've got the third one, which is the combined presentation, which is pretty much what you expect it to be. It's a combination of those three things. And people talk about them as types, but actually it's more about like sort of where you are now, what you mainly present with.
Yes.
So very, the numbers of people who have just the hyperactive impulsive type is actually quite low. It combined pretty kind of frequently diagnosed, and inattentive is interesting because it's being associated a lot with women and girls, but some of that might be about how we are conditioned to fit into the world and not to be problematic, to do what we're told, to be quiet, to not ever talk. And certainly if I'm in my early 50s, so like that's certainly, a thing that I can relate to quite a lot. So that's the base level of what it is. But actually, it affects all kinds of things. So emotional regulation, impulsive thoughts. So there's something called rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is not a medical term, but it's a term that's used to describe an overblown, a large reaction to rejection and criticism, or perceived rejection and criticism. And that was one of the things that was quite sort of key for me. I was finding myself just blowing up really big out of the blue and not being able to control that, and having a really big kind of emotional hangover too, and leading to feelings of shame, etc. And then there's a whole range of executive functions. And I think one of the things with like ADHD comes with its own language. So just to break that down, that's things like the ability to plan. It's your working memory, what you're holding in your mind as you're doing things, sense of time, being able to estimate how long things will take, just that sense of time generally. So everything's now rather than, the future exists, but it's not quite here yet. So starting and finishing tasks, which is the bit that we'd probably see more around the procrastination label.
Yeah.
Switching from task to task, etc. So there's a whole lot of things that are in there.
And I guess it can show up differently for different people and in different contexts, depending on what your role is, who you're working with, what you've got on your plate at a particular point in time, which layers on complexity. I mean, human beings, we're all complex individuals anyway, and then there's almost another layer of complexity happening.
Absolutely, that's it. So like going back to sort of the school kind of example, we often find that sort of kids they'll be fine at primary school. They might have some sort of signs, but it's nothing that's causing problems, because actually for a diagnosis, it needs to be something that's affecting more than one area of your life. But you move from primary school to secondary school, your structure goes. You're in a much less structured environment. You've got all of these options and it becomes harder to cope. So life transitions are often a factor for people. So when you think about that sort of young people, if they go to university, that's a hard one. If they get through university, where the statistics are you're less likely to finish, then you're into work. And that's another big change for people.
And this is my next question about how this could play out in the workplace. As you were talking, I'm thinking, like if you are leading and you have ADHD, is it some of the things like you can make snap decisions because you want to get something done straight away, and less good at the sort of long-term strategic planning? Is there perhaps things about changing your mind as different good opportunities come up that can be difficult for your team? I'm thinking about what you said and I'm kind of putting my lens on it, but I'd be really interested to hear from your experience of being a CEO, how does this play out in the workplace? But I'm more interested in the positives of how that plays out as my second question in there.
Yeah. So again, this depends on you as a person.
Yeah.
It depends on your upbringing, what things that you have in place to support you. So whether you have a kind of a framework that supports you, and what's going on, what's the culture like in the organization. So if you're new to an organization, you're walking into a culture, what's that like? And obviously you have the power to change that. So me, and definitely my experiences, is that my brain is full of ideas.
Mm.
My brain can assess a situation quite quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and know what I think should happen in that situation to change things. To do that relatively rapidly, then one of my problems is then, like, I have to implement it. I don't want to implement it. That's boring. And one of the things about our, like, talk about ADHD brains, is they tend to be interest motivated. We are, the differences in our brains often relate to our neurotransmitters, so the things that send the messages between different parts of the brain and the body. Dopamine's one of those. So it's dysregulated, or we might use it up quickly enough. So if we find that a task is really boring, we might procrastinate over it, we might leave it, or if there's something that's concern. So, and they'll sit there and they'll sit in your brain until you do them. But there'll be this blocker that is almost, it sometimes feels unsurmountable. It's like, you don't really get it. Like, why can't I just do, like, this is literally, why can't I just do this thing now?
Yeah.
But actually, it's because your brain's in a different space. So at that point, doesn't mean to say you're never going to do it. It's just not for you now. So as a leader, it's very much around, like, looking at who's in your team, who actually is great at those things. It's and who might need some development. Who might you delegate it to that will support their development? So you've got a kind of an in there. Someone else is going to do the do, but you can support them into that. So handing stuff off to other people.
Yeah.
Breaking stuff down, because ideas or tasks are often too big. And I mean, this is general good advice anyway. And what I would say is, what works for ADHD tends to work for other people as well. But breaking a task down to make it as small as possible. I can't get started on this thing. So what's the smallest thing that I need to do? Is it walking to my desk and opening my computer? Is it, like, because in all reality, if you're stuck, and particularly if you work from home, you might just be sitting on your sofa trying to get yourself to do this.
Yeah.
So break it down, short deadlines, smaller deadlines. Accountability is often really helpful. So building in things like, I know that you have a session called Get It Done in the ADHD, what we call it body doubling. So you've got someone else who is around doing something completely different, but you've got someone you're doing something with. Again, everyone's different. So in an office setting, what do you need there in your environment to be able to get things done? Is your environment okay? Is it too noisy? Is the lighting right? Do you need to wear noise cancelling headphones? Because sensor issues can come into play as well. Do you get distracted by a thing, a shiny thing? Hello, look at that. Oh, I've had another idea. What did you say? And then you have to switch tasks, which again is harder. So setting up your environment, really important.
I guess if you're working in an office, there's more scope for distractions and bright, shiny things to present themselves. But I guess if you're working at home, there's more time for you to be kind of like in your own head, getting in your own way of getting things done, which I suppose a lot of what you're saying really resonates with me and many of the clients that I work with, regardless of whether they have ADHD or not. So I think the advice about figuring out what you need and then asking for it, and some of the specific things that you've said, is super helpful. A question's just occurred to me. If you're a leader or a manager and you're arriving in an organization, how do you manage up with some of your needs as well?
I think it depends on how well you understand your needs. If you know what it is you need, and you're coming into a culture and you are confident enough to do it, and this is all often the issue, and I'd say to people at the recruitment stage, it's worth teasing out what the culture is already like in the organization and saying, if you haven't already, this is what I need to be able to do my job in the best way. Can we have a conversation about it? You might have strategies that come into play. Explaining to managers who are leaders who are senior to you, or it's like in the example of charities, there's a board of trustees. So explaining so they have a bit of understanding. Not that you have to explain everything, because they also have a responsibility to do a bit of digging and see what this is, but only you know what it is for you.
My next question, I wanted to go back a step. I think I went too far into the process without kind of ticking off the fundamentals. What's the process or some things that people can do to figure out, like, what's my needs at work? What do I need? How do you figure that out?
And this is a biggie because people don't talk about it. So I use something which is like I developed because it was helpful for me to think in this way, sort of a user manual, which people can use individually or you can do with a team. And it got those built-in kind of questions. So very straightforward, from the what are your hours of work?
Yeah.
Literally to what's the best way to contact you if I need a response quickly? What are the strengths that you have? What can you bring to the team? And just putting those down. What things do you find challenging that other people might help you with? Yeah. And exploring some of those questions in a safe space. And you can put it in writing. You can voice note it. If you do it as a team, you are then beginning to create a culture where people understand or understand a bit more about the differences within the team, because at neurodiversity we are all different, and some of us have divergent conditions, which is we're further from the perceived norm. Everyone's brain is different. Take 3 people with ADHD and we're all going to be different, so because it's influenced by our environment and our upbringing. All of those experiences. So working out, you might not know totally, and it changes over time. So this is a sort of exercise you can sit down and do with your team to build psychological safety.
Yeah. And psychological safety is around whatever you do or say, it's met with open ears and without judgment. So you feel safe. You feel safe to try things out that don't work. You feel safe to say the idea that people might never have heard of, that could be unusual, challenging, but you're safe. And that's psychological safety is one of the markers of high performance across all teams. So this document about how we communicate that opens up the conversation of what I'm hearing is, here's who I am and what I need to do my best work, and who are you and what do you need to do your best work. And that's an ongoing conversation because things can change and shift over time.
Yeah, so it's a touch point so that you can get to understand your own brain a bit more, what you need, what environment, what conditions you need to thrive at work. Because most people don't often have that time. They're not often asked those questions. But I think the other thing that I would say in this is, as a leader, to think about that as that's one thing that you're doing in there. It's not just I'm going to do this and everything will be like perfect. Yeah. Actually, it's likely to raise things because people will then be more likely to be open up to you and come to you with things. So you've got to be sort of prepared about the time that will take. And it's just not a snap. It's not like a tick box exercise. It's seriously about doing something over time that will support people. And so it can feel difficult, it can feel uncomfortable, it can feel a bit icky, but it can also feel really wonderful and incredible. So I did this wasn't this exact exercise, but we did something similar in an organization that I was leading. And it was a smallish team, I think about 10 or 11 people. And we were in a sort of phase of discussing these sorts of things. And someone stood up and said, I've realized that I may have said things that are inappropriate, or because that's just the environment that I used to work in. And it was always like that. And I didn't know. So for someone to stand up and be a little bit vulnerable in saying all that, recognizing that shift is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's incredibly powerful, regardless of where you sit on any kind of neurodiversity. It's an incredibly powerful thing to, as a leader, to be able to create a culture where people can bring their whole selves, like everything about them, and feel safe. Often, I feel that ADHD is seen as a negative. I don't agree to that, but that's definitely some of the experiences that I've had when people have kind of apologized for having ADHD. I'm really interested in your perspective on that, but also more about like it's a strength, no? Lots of what you've said and your energy is a massive strength in my view. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for me, there's a lot of this about like for many of us, it is a disability, but it does come with unique strengths,
Yeah.
and the same as everybody else does. And I spent a lot of my life going, I can't do that, I can't do that. But I also spent quite a lot of my life going, I really don't understand why other people just can't see this or can't understand it, and why like what is that about? And some people talk about superpowers. It's not a word that I use because it's more about strengths for me, and I'm picking those and seeing where you fit within a team. Because even if I mean I work on my own, but I collaborate with other people, so it's like, what do I need someone else to do that I can't do? And you're going to have some amazing strengths and amazing things to offer. So for me, as I was saying, that kind of insight, those I can go in and assess a situation. I can have lots of ideas. I can bring people along with me. For other people, they might have ADHD. They might be amazing with numbers. They might be your like come in and go, oh, I want to change that system because like that's going to be much better for everybody else. And there's definitely a thing about bringing other people along with you, which you have to build. I think it goes back to that psychological safety. But yes, we do. And I find that people that I coach often sort of know their strengths, but don't really acknowledge them. They're like challenges, those perceived weaknesses, those limiting beliefs that they have about themselves tend to be bigger than this concept of the strengths and being able to live their life more aligned with their strengths. Yeah. And part of that, I think, is the society that we live in. We're told from a sort of a fairly early age how you should do a thing. This is how you should do a thing, and there's no kind of other way. It's quite a rigid way of thinking. But if your brain isn't going to do that, and we've talked, I know, Lucy, a little bit about like the eat the frog advice, which again, not just about ADHD, but eating the frog, you do the thing that's the hardest, the thing that you're dreading first, doesn't always work as an approach. And for ADHD, you might want to do something in the morning that do the thing first. It's going to give you a bit of that dopamine, a bit of fun, and then you are geared up for the day, rather than starting with the thing that feels like a brick wall to you. But not for all ADHDers. So again, the complexity comes into play here.
So the thing that I am learning from sort of sitting here talking with you is that we're all unique individuals. ADHD is another unique thing for many of us. We have unique strengths. There's uniqueness about what we find boring or are less good at. And actually being able to just be open about, here's my strengths, here's where I need help and support, is the kind of crux of being a leader, regardless of what else is going on around you. And I suppose having the confidence to be able to ask for that, that can feel difficult, regardless of where you see your strengths and weaknesses, or where you kind of see yourself fitting or not fitting. And there's something really important about being a different voice in a room when everyone agrees with each other and everyone sees the world through the same lens. There's not a lot of creativity, there's not a lot of innovation, there's not very much cognitive diversity, and that's not a brilliant thing for teams surviving and being interested in the work that we're doing. So I've got my eye on the clock a little bit. I want to ask you, if what would be your kind of top 3 bits of advice to a leader who may have a diagnosis or may not, but may think, there's some things here you're talking about that are resonating with me. How would you help them navigate?
In the first instinct, excuse me. So in the first instinct, I would say put your own oxygen mask on first. So think about what you need first, the support you might need. And this will depend where you are, but in your thinking and your understanding of yourself, whether it's ADHD or not, just to be able to support other people, you do need to have work through some of it. It doesn't mean to say you can't use the principles of good leadership. Anyway, you can do that, but then accept that it might take a bit of time for you to get to that understanding, and then look at your team, look at what your team needs, ask your team.
Yeah.
It's difficult when you were saying a second ago about actually it takes quite a lot of confidence to be in this space, and not every organization you're not gonna always walk into a culture that has that. So it can take time to build that and create that. But yeah, so accept that there might be time, and again, that's sort of managing upwards as well. It's a whole organization thing. Culture is in everyone. So taking that whole organizational approach will take longer. But it should get you to the point where you're then able to say, right, I'm leaning into this, I'm asking for this. Not to say that you can't do that from the beginning if you've already got that confidence and situations right, but there's a fair amount of flexibility. So find your peers, I would say. I'm going above 3 now, I recognise, but yeah, definitely.
But that's what I would expect, right? Because you're like, and another. So that's
yeah. Find your peers, whether it's in your area of work, whether it's in another area, just people who get you, that you can talk these things through. Think about what you might need. If you need to look about having an assessment around diagnosis, you might want to explore those avenues. There are different ways. There's private, there's the NHS, and there's the thing called Right to Choose as well, which works through the NHS, but is a bit quicker than the NHS lists. What you might be able to ask for from Access to Work, because that is a government grant scheme, which is to enable people to stay in work who have a mental health or a disability.
And so, Anj, if anyone's listening and thinking that they might need a bit of help and support, how do you help leaders with ADHD?
I provide coaching services, so one-to-one coaching. So if you pop over to my website, you can find out more about that there. If you are in work, you can apply for Access to Work funding, or organisations often support with that kind of thing too. And I also do training. So I can come into organisations, I can do awareness training, or I can work around the idea of the user manual and start introducing those kinds of things as a group. So a whole sort of shift of things in there. So my website is www.adhdingwithanj.com. And from there, you'll be able to get links to all kinds of other things, how to get in touch with me. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, the usual places.
We will put all of your links into the show notes. So anyone listening who wants to get in touch with Anj will have multiple channels in which to do it. And thank you so much for your time today. I feel every time I talk to you, I learn lots. I become more confident in talking about ADHD and thinking about the language that's appropriate to you. So thank you for helping me today with that. If you're listening and you're thinking, we've just scratched the surface here. If you would like to hear more about being a leader with ADHD and helping your team and would like Anj to come back, then get in touch. I certainly would really value another chat, Anj. So thank you for spending this time with us. I'm Lucy Gower, a facilitator, trainer and coach, helping leaders develop high-performing teams. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with colleagues and help leverage the impact of the Quiet Leadership Revolution.